guys! Today we are going to talk about one of my least favorite tropes, and I need your help. So, one of my least favorite tropes is when the pastor is evil, or preacher, or vicar, or whatever. Or if it's in medieval times, priests too. Just like, okay. Sarah Elide is really bad about this. I have read at least 2 of her books where either one of them the preacher was straight up evil, and then in the other one he wasn't evil, but he was a little shady and hiding things from the main character and stuff. And I'm sick of this. It happens in other Christian books too. It's just those are the 2 most recent that I've read where it happened. So I thought I would make a video showcasing the good preachers that I have read in Christian fiction. And I thought October would be a great month to do that in, because in case you didn't know, October is Pastor Appreciation Month. So also make sure this month that you tell your pastor how much you appreciate him and his service to the Lord and to your church. Coming from a pastor's wife and a pastor's daughter, that means a whole lot. So, I have a pitifully small list of preachers that are good. My first book that I have with a good pastor is A Dangerous Engagement by Melanie Dickerson. This is one of her Regency Spies. Yeah, this is one of her Regency Spies of London series. This was really fun. I really enjoyed this one. And in this one, I guess it's kind of spoilers, but there is a preacher who shows up in the climax and helps the main character, and he is really, really wonderful. I really loved him. So here's one, but he's a pretty minor character, which is kind of sad. Next, I have the Blades of Actar series by Trisha Mingrink. This is kind of a fantasy series, kind of not. What I mean by that is, it's fantasy in that it is not set in any actual countries on Earth, and it's a very different place, but it's not fantasy in that it's still talking about Jesus. So yeah, the main character's uncle, I don't remember his name right now. Abe, maybe? Main character's uncle, though. Well, maybe she's the secondary main character. I'm not sure if she's the protagonist or the secondary. But anyway, her uncle is basically a pastor, and he is incredible. I loved him so much. He was so great. So yes. So here's another one. Another great pastor. And before I forget, because I forgot to put this one on the list, also in the Elion Chronicles, Timothy winds up becoming pretty much a pastor, and also really great. That one is a fantasy world, so it feels a little bit different, but still, it was really fun. Next, I have A Cross to Kill by Andrew Huff. This one, the main character is a former CIA assassin, and now he's a pastor, which is just really incredible. His faith was great. I loved it. It does him being a pastor does kind of violate 1 Timothy says, don't make your pastor be a recent convert. And he is too recent of a convert to be a pastor, but honestly, considering how short this list is, I was willing to overlook that because, yeah, he was somebody else I could put on the list. Alright, next is, the next 3 have really minor pastor roles, again, but I wanted to include them. So, The Librarian of Boone's Hollow by Kim Volker Sawyer. This pastor only showed up a couple of times, but he was pretty great. He showed up and actually was trying to fix the things that were some of the conflicts that were going on in the town. So that was very pastoral of him. A Deep Divide by Kimberly Woodhouse. This one actually only has a pastor showing up in flashbacks, but he was so good in those flashbacks that I just had to include him. He is a pastor that led the male main character to the Lord. Was so wonderful. I just adored him. He was great. And yeah, very much liked him. In Her Darling Mr. Day, there is also a pastor who shows up in flashbacks by Grace Hitchcock. This pastor shows up in flashbacks, or is that? No, this is the one where a pastor shows up when they need help, and he assists them, helps them get to safety, and yeah, it was again a very tiny appearance, but he was actually a pretty good pastor, all things considered. So yeah, that's how bad this problem seems to be to me, is that I'm including him. I'm including these guys. Really quick, editing Morgan jumping in to add another clip because I finished 2 more books that have good preachers, and so I wanted to just include those since the pickings in this video are very slim. Flights of Fancy by Jen Turano and Diamond in the Rough by Jen Turano. I just finished these books, and both of them had really minor side characters, but still good preacher characters in them. So I thought I would just pop in and add those. Okay, back to the original video. The best preacher I have read in fiction, and I did not want to include on this list, by the way, any biblical fiction, because biblical fiction will have people like Peter and Paul, and honestly, if we're not depicting them as good pastors, what are we doing with ourselves? So yeah, I didn't want to include any of that because those are like apostles. We don't want to, the apostles seem like gimmies. So yeah, the best pastor that I have read so far in Christian fiction is from Stealing the Preacher by Karen Winnemeyer. This pastor's name is Crockett Archer. Yes, I remember his name. He was actually the main character, or the male main character, and oh my goodness, this was a wonderfully sweet book. He was, he knew the Bible. He seemed to embody like all of the characteristics of a pastor that are in 1 Timothy. Obviously not perfectly. No pastor is ever going to perfectly embody all of those, but he showed them all. He even was willing to address some very difficult issues that arose in the congregation. Like there was one thing in particular that most people would have wanted to avoid this confrontation, but he felt the Lord lay it on his heart that he has to go and address this. And it was so well done. I loved him. I loved the relationship in this book. It was just, yeah, this is the best preacher I've ever read in fiction. So I do have a couple on my TBR. I have asked other Christian booktubers if they have any recommendations for good pastors. And one that I've been told about is George MacDonald and his historical fiction, which I've not read any of his historical. I've read his fantasy, but not his historical. So, George MacDonald apparently has some good preachers, so I'm going to read those at some point. And then, I was also told Ruth by Elizabeth Gaskell and Agnes Grey by Anne Bronte. Yeah, Anne. Yeah, it's Anne. Those have really great preachers as well. I will be eventually reading those books. Those are on my TBR. So now, how I want you to help me, please. If you know of Christian fiction books with good preachers, leave them in the comments, especially if they're in my genres. Like, contemporary, I'm not as big a fan of, but if it is romantic suspense, that I don't count that as, I just mean fluffy contemporary romance, but give me those too. If you have one with like an outstanding preacher, I want to know about it. Even if he's a side character, just tell me, please. But yeah, not so much, but romantic suspense, historical fiction, definitely historical fiction. Sort of fantasy. Fantasy is kind of a weird way to have this category at all, but I did have a couple that very much, like, these are very clear allegories, so I just included those as well. So, yes, thank you for watching, and like I said, please, please, please leave your recommendations in the comments below, and like and subscribe, and I will see you all next time. Bye.